around this time too, now all of a sudden other factions starting to come together, and he's wearing it on his t-shirt there, the Four Horsemen. Thoughts just working that territory, the Horsemen coming together? Talk to us about those memories of those days for you.
So are you talking to Arn or me, Paul?
You. We want to hear all about your thoughts.
They know my slant on life and everything about it.
So you want to hear my slant?
I want to hear your slant on all this.
Well, and everybody sees things a little different than everybody. But so when I got in there, the buildings probably, were a third full, maybe a half full. And Arn, that's about what it was when you were in there. Everybody was working hard. We worked every single night. We'd do TVs, and you could tell that the TV was starting to happen in some of the towns, because now it went from a third full to about a half full, and with the different tag teams that were there and the different guys, it ended up being a great group of guys that came in, So now pretty soon, and Dusty worked it really good, because he'd have the new tag teams doing jobs for the guys that have been there for a while. And then you do angles, and pretty soon those guys would be the guys that would be getting over, and it would switch like a circle kind of a deal, where now all of a sudden they're doing jobs for the other guys and getting people over. And it just was a really neat thing to see how the territory and the TVs and the different angles were making it happen, to where all of a sudden things are getting sold out, and, with Arn in there, and all of a sudden he became the Four Horsemen, then it was a whole different, now all of a sudden you got completely different territory. Now everything is selling out everywhere, and it was like you couldn't hurt that machine. Isn't that right, Arn? It was like, no matter what you did, the people were so excited. But
you had, and all of kind of at one time, and within a couple of months, when you had an influx of talent, like, okay, you had the Russians, they were secure. Then you get the Midnight Express comes in. They're incredible. The Rock and Roll Express comes in. They're incredible. Buddy Landale, you got to remember, had an impact.
The Barbarian, and it just
I mean, it was like a lot of talent came in all within just a couple of months, and the TV looked totally different.
And I remember Dusty came up to me and he says, "Barry, baby," he says, "I need to bring a tag team in for you and Ivan to work with. Who do you think?" And I said, "Well, you got to bring the Rock and Roll Express in." And he looked right at me and he says, "I don't want to bring the Rock and Roll Express in." And I don't know why he didn't want to start with. And I suppose it was because they were bigger baby faces than what Dusty was, right? I mean, that was the only thing I could think of. And
I don't know if they had a history prior to that or not. Or that maybe he wasn't, because in those days, if you worked the territory, there was no social media. It wasn't like you knew everything that was going on in the different territories, with what talent was getting over and what wasn't. You didn't necessarily know that they were red hot, but it was their angle with the Midnight for Bill Watts that got them red hot.
Well, exactly. And me and Nikolai Volkov had the angle with the Rock and Roll Express down there in Louisiana. And that kind of did the same thing. It helped pop the territory down there, because we're the big bad Russians going against these smaller, good-looking guys that all the girls are after. And I mean, you leave them hanging on the side of the ring with a rope and everything, and pretty soon everything's popping. And they were so great to work with. That's why I mentioned them up there. I thought with me and Ivan and Nikita, it would have been just a perfect fit for us. And then, so then, I told Ivan, I said, "Yeah, Dusty asked me who to bring in." And I said, "The Rock and Roll Express. I hope you don't mind, And Ivan goes, No, that's what I want to work with." And I said, "Well, Ivan, go talk to Dusty, because I don't think he wants to bring them in, or maybe it was too much money they needed or something. I don't know." But so Ivan went and talked to him. And then Ivan came back. I said, "So are they going to come in?" And he goes, "I think they're going to come in here." And I was so excited for them to come in, not just for us to work with them, but, all the heel teams. This is what's going to really help pop this territory. You needed that babyface team where all all the girls and the kids and everything are to come in. You can get sympathy on these guys. And at that time, the other baby faces was Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude. You know what? You know, that's not much baby face, right?
Well, and Magnum was there.
But Magnum was singles, you know.
Yeah.
So when they came in, and you know, like Arn's talking about, Buddy Landell came in. So it's almost like the whole crew from Watts' territory, you know, Midnight Express, Arn, myself, all of us, we moved from drawing big houses down there to now it's up there in Charlotte. So now everything's working and all the guys are working together. And what was great about it was nobody was jealous of anybody, you know, that I knew of. I didn't mind doing a job for somebody, and somebody didn't mind doing a job for you, because you knew you were always going to get back in an angle somewhere and be something. That was kind of my thought. But you know, Rick, you know, Flair was a major part of that whole thing, you know, because he was the champion. He got, you know, Magnum over, Nikita over, Dusty, all the, you know, right?
Yep. Well, and here's the thing. Rick was all these guys when he was going around. Well, Vince was going around stealing talent. So was Rick. He was going around the territories, and he would say, if he put his stamp on it at that time with Jim Crockett, he's coming in. That's it.
Yep.
That was the deal. And my only thought was maybe, and who could have got into Dusty's head? You know, you don't know what he was thinking, but he might have been thinking they were too small, because at that time, that was a real hang up for a lot of promoters. Oh, well, he's not big enough. Brother, when you get over like they got over, and the way they did it, they didn't do it by coming in. If they would have mowed the Russians down, they'd have booed them out of the building. But they came in, and what they did was sell the whole match.
I had more heat working with those guys than I've ever had with anybody else. I mean, you know, there was one night, you know, we were in Washington, D.C., and, you know, my memory isn't real good with a lot of stuff, but I can remember these stories. We wrestled probably about 55 minutes, and the Rock and Roll Express was going to win, and we screwed them. And the place went freaking nuts. And I mean, I was exhausted. Ivan was exhausted. We were coming out of the ring, and I got my arm around Ivan, and the lights were on us, so you couldn't see anybody. But I saw something coming out of the second floor, the second deck, and it was coming right at Ivan. And I jumped in front of Ivan to cover him. And I thought, well, I'll get my back on it. I got hit, boom, and this sucker hit me in the head. And I was seeing stars. And Ivan looked at me, he goes, Crush, you all right? I said, no, man. I said, fuck my head, you know. So we get back in the dressing room, and Ivan picked this thing up. We get in the dressing room, and he says, you got hit with a hot dog. I said, I got hit with a hot dog. There was a bolt that he pulled out of the hot dog that was about that big. That sucker hit me square. Thank God it didn't hit me in the eye. But that's the kind of heat you had there.
Well, they throw like half-pint liquor bottles from the upper deck.
Yeah.
That was not rare. It happened all the time.
Oh, my gosh. But that was when
spark plugs.
Yeah. That's when you knew you were getting over, you know, and that was the TV. Those guys love to get beat up. Because when they made that comeback and you flew for them, it was unbelievable.